So let me show you the pieces that you're going to need for each of your placemats. For your star unit, you're going to need a 4.5 inch square. In the blue, you're going to need 4 2.5 inch squares in your white. You'll need 2.5 wide by 4.5 long rectangles. And you're going to need 8 2.5 inch squares in the blue. And that's what's going to make up your star. For the stripes, you're going to need 2.5 inch strips by 20 inches. And we're doing them a little bit longer than what we actually need, because after we get the pieces sewn together, then we'll trim it down to whatever size you want. I am making an 18-inch wide placemat. But you might want yours a little longer. You might want yours maybe 16-inch. So just start with, you're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4 strips of the red. And again, that's 2.5 inch by 20 inches. And then you're going to need 3 of the white. And that is 2.5 inches by 20 inches. So let's start with our stripes first. Okay, so we're going to make this in 2 units and then put it together. So the first one, we're going to make 4 rows. So we're going to take a red and we're going to take a white of your strips, and you are going to lay those right sides together using 1/4 inch seam allowance. You just want to sew down the one side of this. So we have this one done. Now we're going to take a red stripe and we're going to lay that right sides together on the white, and you're going to sew that down. Just keep it straight as you're going. And then we're going to add another white strip to the red. Now I'm only making 2 placemats because I just wanted 2 at my kitchen island. I did cut all my pieces together, and when I'm cutting, I like to work in small strips, small pieces, so I just cut out little squares to get all my pieces of blue that I needed, and I cut my strips with the fabric for my stripes that I needed. So we have that one. That's going to be our first unit. Because with the star, we're doing an 8-inch star. So these are going to finish at 2 inches each. So we're going to put this now over here, and we'll iron at the same time. Now we need to start with the red. This is our second unit. And do a white. Right sides together again, 1/4 inch, and sew down the side. I'll just press them all at once we get our units made. Okay, so let's open that up. Now we're going to add a red, because on this one we just need 3. So what we're going to do is press toward the dark. So I'm going to first set my seam. Then I'm going to fold that back so my seam is going up toward the dark. Fold it up toward the dark. Okay, so that's our first unit. Lay that to the side. Now let's bring our second unit down. Do the same thing. Press that and then fold it back. So your seam is going to go up toward the dark. Go ahead and set that seam and bring this one, do the same thing toward the dark. Usually you're going to want to press your seams to the dark. Okay, and that's our second unit. So we have 4 in our first unit and 3 in our second unit. So now we can lay this to the side and we can do the star. Okay, so to get your star unit, you're going to have your middle square. You're going to have your 4 corners. You're going to have your 4 rectangles. And then you're going to have 8 of your blue squares. And you need to put 2 blue squares with each of your rectangles. Now, let's go ahead and get our center square and our 4 corner squares out of the way. We'll take 4 of these squares and put those to the side because we're going to work on these first. So what you're going to do is take one of your rectangles and one of your blue squares. So you have a white rectangle and a blue square. And on the short end, you're going to lay your square on top of your rectangle, and you want your right sides together. And then what you're going to do is mark from corner to corner. So you're going to mark from the upper left and bring it down toward the center, the middle. And lay that by the machine because we're just going to chain piece these. And then you're going to do the next one. So you want to do all 4 of those the same. And then we'll go to the machine. So on that line that we just made, we are going to sew from the corner, following our line all the way down to the other corner. Okay, And I'm chain piecing, so I'm just going to go ahead and feed the next one in right after that one. I'm just going to start. When you do this, it just helps the process go a little faster. Just make sure you stay on your line, and then you want to feed the next one in. Follow your line, and then your last one. Okay, so then this is what you have, your little chain, and we're just going to clip those apart. Okay. Okay, so when I'm getting ready to cut, I do like to lay them all in the same direction that I need to cut. So, because when I lay this back, it's going to need to go like this. So if I lay them all out, and I know that I need to cut them all like this, it keeps me from cutting the wrong end, the wrong side. So what you're going to do from that sew line that you just did, you are going to trim off 1/4 of an inch on each one of these. You can see how this goes really quickly. Okay. All right. Now what we need to do is fold these back and press up toward the blue. Okay, so now we're going to sew our other side on. So what we're going to do is put our square on the other short edge, and when you lay that back, that is where your star unit is going to come in. Okay, so what we're going to do, and you notice too that your blue is going to overlap, and you want that because that's what's going to form your star. Down here you're going to be overlapping, see, and when you cut that and then you fold that back, that's where you're going to get your point for your star. I'm just going to sew one of these and then real quick, and then come back and show you how we cut and make our star units. So I sewed that, and now what I'm going to do is the same thing I did on the first piece. I'm going to go ahead and clip that. I'm going to set that seam and fold it back, and now that this is what we have. Okay, so before I start cutting, clipping those edges off here, I do like to fold them back just to make sure that I sewed them right. It's always better to double check yourself. So let's go ahead and from 1/4 of an inch from our sewing line that we just did, let's just clip that. Cut that off with our rotary cutter. You can cut it with scissors if you like. I prefer the rotary cutter because then I know I'm getting a good clean cut. You work with the best tools you have. Okay, now let's go ahead and set the seam. And fold it back toward the blue. Okay. And then let's lay it out. Okay, so we have our center unit. Let's go ahead and put our corner units in. And then you want your little triangle going, want your little point going in towards your blue square. And that's what's going to form your star. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew this to this to this end, these, and these. Again, I like to think of these as units. So we're going to sew unit A, unit B, and unit C. We're going to use 1/4 inch and just sew down this side. Okay, and flip it around. And then let's do the same thing. Okay, I'm going to do the next one. Flip it around. Okay, now I'm going to do my center. So I'm going to make sure I'm lined up. And what I want to make sure is if you see this little point right here, I want to make sure that when my needle gets to this point, that my needle is on this side, the right side, so I don't lose my point there. So I hold my stiletto there. Okay. And I'm going to come over, I'm going to line my blue up on this end, and I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm going to slow down when I get to this section right here to make sure that I don't lose my star point right here. Bring that back. Okay. And let's press this open, and then we'll be ready to sew the sections together. Okay. So I'm going to set my seam and roll this back, and I'm going to press on my end squares out toward the white this time. Okay, so I have this one. Let's just go ahead and do our end pieces since we're pressing those the same, because the other one we're going to press in the opposite direction. And then press toward the white square. Okay, lay this back down. And now the center, what we're going to do is we're going to press those in toward the center square. So I'm going to turn it around on the back so I can make sure. I'm going to lightly press that. Come over here and lightly press this. And the reason I do that is because I want to make sure, sometimes when you iron from the back like that, you'll get a little crease in this, and you don't want that because you will lose your size of your block if you do that. So I don't want to end up with a crease in that. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sew this end, and what we want to make sure is that we're lining up our seams. So if I stick my pin on my sewing line on my front, and when it comes through the back and it's on that sewing line, that's how I know I have my seams lined up. And I'm going to get good points. And then by pinning like this, what I can do is flip it over and I can check to make sure I'm lined up. Okay. And then I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Okay. So again, we're using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to come down. Once again, I'm coming up to where that point is, and I don't want to lose that. So I need to make sure that I stay on the right side of this seam right here. Before I go any farther, I do like to flip it over just to make sure that I had it lined up. I'd rather catch it earlier than later. Okay. I'm coming up here. I need to make sure that I stay on the right side of that point right here where I'm holding my stiletto. Okay. Go ahead and take my pen out. Okay, and then straighten myself up there at the edge to line that up. Once again, I'm going to flip it around just to make sure that it's lined up. Okay, so let's go press this out and then we're ready to put our placemat together. Okay, so I am going to turn this around. I'm going to set that seam. I am going to clip as I go any strings, and there's a little dog ear I had that I didn't get. I just like to keep it cleaned up as I go from the strings. Okay, so I'm going to set the seam, and then I'm going to press out. So just fold it back and press. And I do like to press my star units flat. So after I do this, I'm going to once again set that seam. I see a couple strings here I can clip. Okay, set the seam, and then I'm going to fold this back. Okay, now what I like to do is give it a little spray with water just to make it lay flat. And there's our star unit. Okay, so the next step is to put our star unit onto our first section that we did. So that is the 4 stripes that you sewed together, and you want to make sure that your red is at the top. So what I'm going to do is lay these together. Then I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to stitch down the side. Okay, so once again, I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to sew down. I'm going to just make sure that I didn't lose my points, and I'm good. So now we're ready to, and you can see we just grew here because we just added those stripes. So I could clip that down now if I wanted, but I will just wait till I'm finished sewing and cut it down to the size that I want all at the same time. So I am going to just put a couple pins in here just to hold this in place while I sew. Okay, and then what I'll do is just sew from here down. Okay, so I knew that I wanted this 18 inches wide. So I went ahead and measured over 18 inches. And now I'm going to use that line that I made to cut this. And then I can use this for another project. So that will go in my scrap bin. Okay, and because I wanted 2 placemats, I now have the tops for 2 of them. And what I'm going to do is put batting and a backing on. And then we're going to quilt, doing a stitch in the ditch and bind it.